On today's pod, we'll be speaking with adjunct professor at Northwest Vista College, Rebecca Steckler. We'll also have a conversation with AGMC members Ivory Newsom, Carlton Whitehurst, and Horace Charles, and their personal take on current events sparked by the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. I'm Dale Sandish.
And I'm Mike Flores, and this is
One Voice. Hello, Mark.
Hey, Dale. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. I'm doing all right. Had a lot of thoughts in my head this last week. I don't know.
Thoughts?
Thoughts.
About
some good,
what?
some bad. Well, the fact that this weekend was going to be our spring concert,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
and we had to cancel it due to the COVID-19
That's right.
pandemic. It's just a worldwide pandemic. Just
You know,
a kooky little thing like that.
there's not enough space for us to stand, far enough apart to actually be able to sing so people can hear.
Right. Exactly. So unfortunately, we had to cancel the concert. We've had, for those who are not Austin Gay Men's Chorus members, we've been doing some virtual music, some recording stuff, some videos and things to try and keep ourselves going as a chorus. And I'm going to talk to Rebecca in a little while about that. So, Mark, you want to make the first introduction here?
Of course. I want to welcome Horace Charles. He's originally from the West Indies and describes himself as a trans man in endless transition. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's like, how should I play this? Should I do like a Princess Diana or like a very like news anchory?
I thought the Princess Diana was well done.
Thank you. I practice a lot.
And then I'd also like to introduce to our panel for today's pod, Ivory Newsom, also known as Peter Rabbit. Ivory studied dance at the University of Texas and is basso profundo with the Austin Gay Men's Chorus. Welcome, Ivory.
Good evening. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Again, the Diana wave. Are you in your backyard right now? Is that what I'm saying?
I'm in my front yard. Yeah, I'm sitting in the front.
I love the
under my
tree
front
above
yard.
you. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a crepe myrtle that's it's about to start blooming, but it hasn't bloomed
Wow.
yet.
I love crepe myrtle. Reminds me of my mother, who's still with us.
Because of her crepey neck, or was
The crepe neck, yeah.
Oh, okay.
No,
Is
they
her
have
name
a
Myrtle?
her name is Patricia,
okay.
but they've got a beautiful.
I don't see the connection.
She's got a beautiful crepe myrtle bush in the front yard of their home.
Oh, okay.
And she loves it when it blooms, and I do too. And so I planted one about a month ago in my front yard.
Wonderful.
Yes. Continue, please, Mark.
Okay. Next is Carlton Whitehouse II. And he is a-
First.
I'm sorry, Whitehurst. Excuse me. Oh my goodness. So rude. He is a clinic administrator and an amazing confectioner. We've enjoyed his baked creations several times at Austin Gay Men's Chorus. Welcome, Carlton, to the pod.
Thank you.
Hey,
I'm
Carlton.
giving you Julie Andrews and Princess
Yes.
Diaries.
Combination.
Thanks for doing that, Mark. I still can't find that paper. It's on my computer somewhere. My
Okay.
printer doesn't work, so this is all just kind of juggling stuff. But thank you for making those introductions. So we with every pod that we do here with our Gay Men's Chorus members, we talk about what brought you to the chorus originally. What your passion is, why you like to sing with the chorus. And we can go around the board here and find out a little bit about that. Ivory, when did you start singing with the Austin Gay Men's Chorus?
I started singing probably about 3 seasons ago. This is my 3rd season with the Gay Men's Chorus.
And how did you discover the chorus?
I'd always been kind of aware of the chorus, but actually really thought it was a professional chorus and was really intimidated about trying to be a part. But then when I found out it was a community chorus, I decided to audition.
Right on. Yeah, we're so grateful to have that beautiful bass voice of yours.
And you've been performing in Austin for many years in various different ways. Tell us a little bit about that.
I'm a fine art dancer. I got my degree in fine art with a focus in dance from the University of Texas and actually started working professionally before I had graduated and just continued to work here. People often ask me, why didn't you go to New York? I'm like, I didn't need to go to New York. I was getting work here.
There you go.
Yeah. A lot of people think that New York is the be all and end all of the arts and entertainment. For people who live there, it is.
It's a mecca, but it's not. I was able
Right.
to create and even today sustain a fine art career here.
Yeah. When people say, "Well, why aren't you in New York?" I usually say, "Well, then you wouldn't see me here."
That's true.
You know, and the arts has to be all over the country and all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, Carlton, hit you up with the same question. What brought you to the chorus?
I was looking for basically an outlet and somewhere to belong. I didn't quite find my voice well accepted in different parts of the gay community. As we know, there are different subsets of the community, and I was just looking for a home, and I love to sing, and I did a lot of research about the chorus, and I showed up to a couple failed auditions, failed because I didn't walk through the door. And then one day in 2018, I just basically, I walked in, someone in the parking lot was like, "Are you coming in?" And at that point I've been spotted. So, and I was ushered right on in and had my audition, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And here I am.
So wait, you got to the door and you decided that it was too intimidating to go in?
I would sit in the parking lot at Trinity and watch people go in. And
oh, sweetheart.
Yeah, I did that for I did that for about maybe 3 seasons.
Oh my God.
And then
Wow.
I finally was just
God.
like, okay, let's just do this.
Carlton, I did not know that.
Wow.
But
Makes me
I'm
want
glad
to
I
hug
did
you
it.
even more right now.
I mean, I wouldn't suspect at all that there was any kind of trepidation or hesitancy on your part because of your personality. You have become a leader in the chorus. You're on the board. You are, you're involved in so many aspects of the chorus.
I guess once you realize we were just a bunch of putzes anyway.
Well, I mean, at least Gail and I are.
Like, oh, these guys, please.
Wow, that's amazing.
Glad you made it through the door. That's impressive. Horace.
Hi.
Hi, hon.
Hi.
So what brought you to the chorus?
So my partner Nick and I, who's in the next room, Senses Love, hey.
Hi, Nick.
Hi, Nick.
So he and I actually came from the Phoenix Metropolitan's men's chorus out in Phoenix, Arizona, Marcus Don. And when we first moved here, we quickly figured out that it was something that we desperately missed. We desperately missed being around other gay men, being around, like people who we didn't have to explain our jokes to, like just having that camaraderie. So once we moved here, we started looking for choruses, and at first we were looking at a chorus in Round Rock, but then like by chance, I had happened to see, I think it was like a Facebook invite for auditions back in 2018. So August of 2018 was my first season, and I just fell in love with it. I was like, this is the greatest place. Like like Dale said, like it was definitely a church-like experience for me. Like I go here more than I go to church. So like it's something I always look forward to. And it's where my heart is. Like I never thought that I'd find an organization that was just so beautiful and so welcoming and so filled with people like me, people who get it, and we just sound amazing. Like not to brag or anything, but we're an awesome group. So I'm really glad to be here.
I agree.
Too.
Yeah.
Rebecca, what brought you to our concert last year?
Well, I was gonna say, as a non-member of the chorus, but has been to hear y'all sing, they all sound fantastic. I can vouch as a fan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no,
You saw Unbreakable, didn't you? Last year?
I did see Unbreakable.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Which was
wow.
incredible.
Yeah. Probably the most meaningful and personally moving bit of music that I've done with a chorus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
I can imagine. It was very moving as an audience member, and everyone. I mean, it was really cool to be in the audience, and I mean that's something I think about Austin in general. I feel like people really, not that that's not the case other places, but every show I've been to here, people are just really invested in it. But with y'all, I mean, it was even almost a different reaction. I mean, just looking around, there's just a lot of tears, a lot of joy. It was an even more emotional crowd than I'm used to seeing in Austin, which is saying something, because people are usually pretty emotional at concerts here.
Yeah.
So.
Well, good. I'm glad that was the reaction.
Yeah.
Is anybody here familiar with Michelangelo Signorelli? He's an author.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, terrific author. He's written some great books, and one of the books, this is sort of speaking to what Ivory mentioned a few moments ago about moving to New York and so on. He talks about how in the turn of this recent century, how gay men and women don't have to move to urban centers to find community because of the more accepting attitudes in smaller towns, that the centralization of the gay culture doesn't have to be in an urban setting like a New York or a San Francisco. Although that's one of the reasons why I moved to New York, was to do theater and to also be around other gay people living in the West Village for 25 years in New York. Do you find that to be the case here in Austin, that you can, because I don't find, except for the men's chorus, I don't find a big gay community here, a real camaraderie. Am I missing something, or is that?
I think there used to be. I mean, I lived here in the 80s and early 90s before I moved to New York. It felt like there was a bigger, more sort of cohesive gay community back then.
Yeah, I think also I call it the will and gracing of our society. It's sort of after things become more accepted and more normalized, they become a little less special. And I think taking away the specialness of being a gay man in an oppressive society means you don't really have the need to be immersed in it as much.
Well,
I'm proud.
Let's ask our guests. I mean, Ivory, what have you experienced in terms of, feeling like part of a community in Austin?
I agree that there really isn't a defined gay community. In other urban areas, there's a specific, like Dale was talking about the West Village. In San Francisco, you have all the Market Street, and all those things are specific gay areas that are not just bars. The only gay living areas here in Austin are bars.
Yeah.
And although there are nonprofits that serve specific populations, that I don't think there's a specific unified gay community here in Austin that I've experienced.
And even in New York,
since
and even
90s.
in New York now, sorry to talk. I'm sorry. Even in New York now, though, I mean, I was there when the internet was sort of, taking over, and the sort of ghettoization of gay people became unnecessary because we were able to find each other through a new technology, and it has kind of decimated the gay neighborhoods in New York. They don't really exist any longer.
There's still a clique mentality. I think.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. Sure. Some parts of Chelsea and but they take the parade every year right down Christopher Street, and there are not that many gay people that live there anymore.
No, it may have been the epicenter during the riots back in 69 rather.
Yeah.
68.
Well, they take the parade right by the Stonewall Inn.
Yeah. Which I lived 5 doors down from.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the parade went right by my apartment every year. But you're right. One of the reasons why I'm not there anymore is because it became a corporate. There was a Starbucks in every corner, and that sense of community. And I mean, I'd sit on my front steps and have a cigarette what was that, tofuti ice cream.
When you say cigarette, do you mean a cigarette or do you mean
no?
like
I used to smoke.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And I'd watch the parade, and you had leather daddies, and you had fairies, and you had all kinds of the gay community and artists, and by the time I left, it was baby carriages and men in suits with their briefcases. And believe me, everybody's got a place, in this world, and anybody can live anywhere, as far as I'm concerned. But it took away that specialness out of that neighborhood. People still revere the West Village as as one of the most beautiful spots to live in New York, but the people, it changed dramatically by the time I left there. And
Carlton, Horace, what are your experiences with community in Austin or other places?
Go for it, Horace.
Okay, so I feel like I would agree with Ivory that the gay community here is kind of spread out all over the place. Like I only feel like a close sense of community when it's summer and like Pride's coming. So like from June to August, like everybody's got their flags out. Like you can really like hang out like at a designated LGBT space. There are like events, especially for like people in the sober crowd like me, people who who want to enjoy being gay and being part of the community without having the alcohol in the mix. But unfortunately, like that really only lasts, like I said, through the summer Pride months, and then it's back to just having like bars as our meeting spaces, like Barbarella's or like maybe like Swan Dive downtown. But there isn't like a designated space or community that I can just like immediately off the top of my head be like, oh, here in Austin is where the gay neighborhoods are. Here's where we hang out, XYZ.
Right. Yeah.
I would totally agree. I'm born and raised here in Austin. I spent a small stint outside of Austin in Houston while I was going to Prairie View. And there is where I actually experienced my first gayborhood. I had friends that lived in Montrose. And to be able to stay overnight in Montrose and walk out in the morning, and you see, like you said, the leather daddy couple walking down the street, and it's a thing. They're having their coffee, they're waving hello, and that's not something you're going to get here in Austin.
Right.
It's not something I've seen personally in the new apartment community I'm in, which is odd. And I bring this up. I am making a point, but the new apartment community I'm in, the entire staff, they're all LGBT. Wow. And I feel like they like made my building the gayborhood because I have the lesbians next door and I have the gays above me and I have the daddies over here, and I'm just like, oh, I have my own little gayborhood, but this is the closest I've ever gotten to it. And when you speak of things like that, it also, to me, not to go too far off topic, but it also speaks to me when you were talking about the parade and how the parade goes down Christopher Street, which was once a gayborhood. And it's similar to how we have our parades here in Austin. Like we have our MLK and our Juneteenth parades. Those parades go down MLK, and they go down streets that were traditionally Black neighborhoods, and now they're so gentrified that you don't see us living on these streets anymore. We can't afford to live here. People forget that I-35
especially
was
35.
built. I-35 was built to split the colored and the non-colored communities.
Exactly.
And people forget that, and they don't understand. And I think there's significance in the fact that people actually were up there protesting on 35 because it was the pillar of Jim Crow here in Austin, Texas. Yeah. So, not to get too far off topic, but
that's an important point.
That's off topic. Opinion. That's right on topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is gentrification, definitely.
Sure.
Right.
We've seen. So speaking to that gentrification and how the groups are purposely divided, what do you think about the recent protests that have happened due to the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis? I really want to go there and see what your thoughts are on that. The horrifying images that we saw. And then I'll speak about my take on it, but I want to hear your take on it, everybody. Rebecca, let's start with you because you've sort of been out of the conversation for me. What are your thoughts about what you've seen and witnessed?
I mean, it's a lot of different emotions. I mean, it's obviously, of course, the videos are horrific. you know, the trauma that, and I mean, I can't even, you know, I can't even imagine, you know, as a white woman, just, you know, it's so hard to watch. And I just can't imagine for, you know, for people who are actually subject to, you know, specifically Black Americans, those, you know, just those images over and over again when it's your reality also, or when it's very often people's reality. So I'm horrified by the images, but also, I mean, the fact that it's really, the fact that they've sparked this much of you know, action on a specific, I mean, mainly like even the younger, was it Gen Z?
Gen Z, I think, is the latest one.
Yeah. I can't keep up, but like that there's,
I can't keep up.
even amidst this, I mean, yeah, it's so, because here we have this pandemic, but people are out there on the streets. And I mean, I think that's exactly what should happen, in spite of, you know, the pandemic and everything else going on. So it's inspiring. I guess I'm inspired, but horrified, inspired, but then also, I guess a little, I guess the cynical side of me is just kind of worried that, you know, like, how can we keep this going? Because I feel like one thing that I sort of think about as a sociologist is like, what really inspires people to act, and what does it take to, because I'm seeing, and one thing that, you know, social media it's such a weird place, but I'm seeing people that I know that were not very empathetic about what was going on in Ferguson are all of a sudden, you know, just very adamant that these protests need to happen now. So that's good. But I guess I'm wondering what it takes to get people to, you know, because what happened on the George Floyd was horrifying, but it's not new. And what, and so I don't really know the answer to that, and what it takes to get, you know, because it seems like everyone has sort of a different point at which they're, you know, specifically, you know, I think, or, you know, that kind of calls them to action, I guess, right. Or you know, makes them sort of wake up and see, you know, kind of what's going on. I love the writer Ta-Nehisi Coates. He talks about this, the concept of dream. I think he's talking about the American dream in general, and how for, you know, a lot of people with white privilege, they're just kind of, you know, just going by in the world and not really, you know, seeing what's happening and seeing how, you know, they're sort of not subject to violence and to a lot of the things that other communities are subject to. And, you know, kind of what it takes people to wake up from that dream, I guess, is what I'm still sort of thinking about. But it seems like this latest incident has forced a lot of people to wake up from that.
And let's not forget about the incident that happened 2 days ago in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yes. Yeah.
With Mr. Brooks being shot by police as well. So anybody else with your thoughts on what we've been talking about here?
I think that, Rebecca, you said something very interesting, that you were wondering how we kind of keep the momentum going. Like, now that, like, we started seeing change actually being enacted, like, actual movements to defund and abolish the police and replace them with mental health care and designated social work to kind of alleviate the burden on these police officers who are not trained to handle these specific circumstances, and oftentimes are being thrust into the field where that lack of training, heightened with a sense of entitlement to pull your gun out and take authority over the situation, is what often leads to these altercations where Black and brown people are being killed every single day. But it was actually really funny to me because
Darlin,
yes.
Can you hold that thought one second?
Yeah, we're about to stop.
We're going to go ahead and we're going to take a short break here. When we come back, we'll continue right with you, Horace. Thank you.
Okay.
And Horace, you were talking about the policing and the state of affairs.
Yes. I was jumping off of what Rebecca was saying about how she was wondering how the momentum would continue. And I had read something really funny on Twitter that was like, it only took a week of white people being treated like black people for actual change to start happening. So I was like, listen, y'all are fine. Like this will continue, because for the first time in my lifetime, because I remember back in 2012, 2013, going to Mike Brown protests and having to having to physically use my body along with other protesters to kind of throw ourselves in front of cop cars so they wouldn't drive through the protest and like break the gap and like hurt other people. Like going from that and then the next day being like a ball full of emotion, and then just having to relay that emotion to just a sea of white colleagues, because I went to a predominantly white institution. So just having them just stare blankly at me like we don't get it, to here now where I'm joined by people who I never thought in a million years would ever like be social activists or get on board with anything remotely non-centrist. Like you're marching with me, you're reaching out to me saying, hey, how can I help you? Like, how are you doing? And it's just been incredible. And people are starting to feel that. Like people are noticing, and people are more willing to have this conversation. And yeah, I think it's amazing. I think it's fantastic. Every time I see pictures or videos of protesters in the street protecting each other or handing out masks or, linking arms or taking moments of silence, I think that it's wonderful. And as far as like the fires go, the destruction of property, I have so much to say about that, but honestly, like the value of property will pale in comparison to human life every single time. So by all means.
Metaphorically, you need to start a few fires to get a movement going.
Exactly.
I mean, the gay rights movement didn't begin with, happy little postcards being sent around to people saying,
hey, didn't I got one.
You got one? No, it was a black trans woman.
Telling your age.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It was a black trans woman who stood up to the police at Stonewall. They began riots in the streets on Christopher Street in New York.
It was a black trans woman, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think protests and movements can start without, breaking some glass, and waking people up.
And it's important that you say that, because for all the people really chirping about like, oh, like why are they destroying the community? Like why are they rioting? Why are they so violent? Like we tried the whole peaceful thing, girl. Mm-hmm. You didn't like that either. So
right.
Like what do we have? What do we have left to do? Like
right. I heard I don't know if it was Spike Lee or somebody was commenting recently saying basically, we should be lucky that there isn't a black revolution in this country. There's never been a real black revolution. It's been peaceful protest. Mm-hmm. It's been marches that Martin Luther King believed that inevitably they would become violent.
Right.
But he was not going to start the violence. That was the whole part of the peaceful protest. It's a very Mahatma Gandhi also believed that peaceful protesting. But sometimes you gotta.
Do you guys think that part of what might help sustain this movement is the fact that there is such a polarization in the country? I know that you would think that it would have something to do with squelching the fire, but because there is such friction and conflict right now, and it's an election year. I think, and plus COVID, I mean, we're just kind of sitting around at home. We're not distracted by a lot of entertainment. Like all we're seeing right now is, we're either dealing with COVID or we're dealing with Black Lives Matter. And, there seems to be this element of white people finally realizing that it's not a black problem, that it's a white problem. And that if we really want to help the black community, we need to address that as our problem. What do you think about that? Is that something that you feel like might help sustain the momentum of this?
Yeah.
Do you see any evidence of that? Or, I mean...
I think now that a blanket has sort of been snatched off of the treatment that Black and brown people um, experience day in, day out. We only have the uproar now because we saw a video of a cop kneeling for nearly 9 minutes on the neck of a Black man. How many videos don't
Exactly.
get, right? How
Right.
many videos, how much of that treatment and now there is a movement that's outlawing that approved procedure. Because remember at the time, it's an approved restraint procedure.
I don't think knees on necks were ever considered an approved restraint.
Chokeholds were.
Chokeholds,
sure.
but not knees on necks. But
Wow.
I get your point.
But
yeah.
it's a practice, even though it wasn't sanctioned, it was a practice that was widely used.
Common.
Yes.
Common practice.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Actually, a Malcolm X quote where he's talking about that. I don't have it, but he mentioned something about basically, you're on my neck, something to that effect. I don't want to misquote it, but
yeah.
So it's been around.
Even Ruth Bader Ginsburg mentions it in a lot of her speeches, that you put the oppression against women, and then the knee on the neck. So as far as defunding the police, this is something that, Democrats have a way of fucking themselves over.
They do.
because we're gonna take this terminology of defunding, and it sounds like we want to completely dismantle police and have everything, an open society where we could police ourselves. That obviously is not
gonna work.
It's not a movement. A taking of money and restructuring a police force, I think is definitely important. I mean, consider the origins of police, especially in the South.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
To chase after slaves. It became this group of men, white men, who would chase slaves and incarcerate, and that's how policing started here in the United States. Of course, there's a racist background to the origins of it. So to restructure it, I think is definitely important. And you mentioned, Horace, about using that money for training officers. I'm saying not even train the officers. Let's not even put the officers in charge of things like homelessness, drug intervention, places where even traffic stops.
Right. We'd have assigned professionals for these.
Yes, exactly.
So I actually disagree. I believe that we should abolish the police altogether and replace it with these task force, because I'm not sure it was Kimberly Crenshaw who said it, but the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. So let's say we go about in the direction of defunding the police, right? The NYPD gets $6 billion a year. I think APD gets $130 million a year. So let's say we divvy this up into getting these mental health resources, getting social workers for domestic violence victims, getting whatever it is that we need. We demilitarize the police because there's no reason why you need sound cannons and AK-47s. So we get there, right? But the institution, which was built as a slave catching force, which evolved into an over-policing force, that still remains. That structure still remains, and there are still people who seek to take advantage of that and live out their little racist fantasies and join the police force. And within that police force, there's that sense of fatal camaraderie where all the good cops aren't saying anything at risk of being blackballed or losing their careers. So they allow the bad cops and are often sucked into that maliciousness that comes with police brutality. So while we have the blueprints and like the ambition to kind of, or the not ambition, but the optimism that if we defund the police and we alleviate some of the burden, that maybe like police brutality will decrease. Police brutality will always remain as long as there's police.
And
that's just what I feel.
So in situations where aggressive force is needed to quell a situation, what kind of enforcement is appropriate then?
So when you say aggressive force, you mean like people with guns or?
Yeah, let's say there's somebody holding somebody hostage. There's a hostage situation.
Okay.
Let's say somebody's robbing a bank with armed,
There are models in the world of countries that don't have police systems like we do.
Right,
And so they do have forces that will only respond to those particular kinds of circumstances with force. Otherwise, they don't have the kinds of structures that we have, where we over police and over jail our citizens.
Right.
So I'm loath to allow this conversation to become just about that. I want to kind of like keep it free and flowing.
Let's take an example. I don't know if you're familiar with the Lisbon Protocol. The Lisbon, they had a terrible heroin addiction problem in Lisbon, and instead of having police arrest and incarcerate addicts, they had a different tactic. They used that money that would normally have been used in that regard, and they applied it towards giving addicts support and treatment, and treating it like a mental health issue, as it is. And they completely turned their whole. They also legalized drugs. They decriminalized drug use in Lisbon, and it completely changed the whole problem that they were having. And I think if we could get out of that corporate system that we have of incarceration, and in this country, that's the problem. I think it's because the people don't want to lose their money.
Right. Like, what's the incentive?
And that's the thing, right? And that's the issue, right? There's so much money made off of prison systems.
Yes.
And I don't know if you've seen 13th, where
Not yet.
and again, they lost free labor, so they want that free labor from somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
And prison it's I recently discovered that Starbucks uses prison labor.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. I'm not a fan to begin with, but now,
So that's a whole free labor force. And then you get them in there and you keep violate them. And so that recidivism, they get longer sentences while they're already locked up, right? They get charged with more crimes while they're locked up. And so again, it's to perpetuate a free labor system.
Well, it's also a bail problem. I mean, it's like, African Americans and people of color are disproportionately jailed longer because they can't afford bail, and so
they can't afford bail. They can't afford the representation. For
Exactly.
example, what was his name? Chase. I forget his last name, but fully kills a slew of people, and then you have the black guy. It was a comparison in cases, and I wish I could remember everything about it. But what happened was they both had they did a comparison, and they both had no contest pleas, and one ended up being sentenced to 2 years in county. The Chase guy, who was white, and then there was the black guy who was sentenced to 20 some odd years in prison.
Years.
Yeah.
25 years in prison, and they had committed one crime. Was the black guy's crime was a much less of a crime than the other guys, and these were tried by the same judge around the same time. So these are just examples of how even once you're in the system, you still can't win, because they're not placing the funds where the funds need to be. The funds are not being placed into a good defense for people that can't afford to have that.
Yeah.
Whereas
the public defenders are so overwhelmed. I've been in the system myself years ago, but what I saw, I was treated much differently than the jailed criminals who were there and who were represented by the public defenders. They had maybe 5 minutes each to speak with their public defender. I had hours with my lawyer. And I know that if I were black, I wouldn't have been able to get a lawyer, at least for what the crime was that I committed, because I didn't have money. And I told the lawyer that I would pay him in increments, and so on. So he worked out a deal with me. Honestly, I don't think it would have been the same.
That's pretty surprising.
Yeah, I don't think it would have been the same. And that brings me to another point that I wanted to bring up about policing, and then we can move on from there if you'd like. To use the police force for traffic stops, I think it's ridiculous. If you're pulled over for a rolling stop, and if you're a black man, you're profiled. I think you're definitely profiled immediately. And the show of force of a policeman, just by walking to your car with a flashlight, with guns on their belts, with tasers, with their flak jacket puffing out their chest, and the attitude, it's far more, it's unnecessary. It's a militarization of the police just by that very fact. Then to use that time, the police officer is not there to give you a ticket for the rolling stop. They're there to find more charges that they can add to it. They're going to look in your back seat. If there's anything suspicious, anything that looks like a pipe, a bong, a roach on the floor, anything, just by visual search, then they have probable cause to get you out of that vehicle, to put you in handcuffs and take you away. And I think by taking the traffic cop out of the equation, how about a group of people that will drive behind cars and take down the license plate number and send you a ticket in the mail, just like we do for toll booths. You pay by mail. You get tickets in the mail for parking infractions, right? Why not do that for other infractions and take the police completely out of the equation, where it's just going to blow up into something that's unnecessary? That's my little take on that.
I agree, because within those traffic stops, the police have quotas to meet every month. So they're looking out for black and brown people to pile it on, and then give ticket after ticket, and then those altercations occur because why are you pulling me over? Like I didn't do anything, and then it gets hostile really quickly because me expressing anything else other than subservience means that I'm challenging you. So this has to be a hostile situation. You have to fear for your life. You have to reach for your gun. And then, next thing you know, I'm on a t-shirt and my mama is crying on the news asking for justice.
And then on top of that, you have to think about it. I grew up in a household where we actually practiced how to handle yourself at a traffic stop. My mother was adamant about it. She was like, "You are not out after this point in time. You are not allowed in this neighborhood in your car after this at this hour. This person cannot ride in your car. You keep your registration right here in the visor. You don't move when the cop is approaching your car. It is yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. It's whatever it needs to happen to make sure you make it back home that night." The key behind all of this with my mother was, it is your responsibility to do what you can to make it home that night. I will handle everything else after that. My mother was very vigilant. She also worked for TxDOT, and we have a lot of first responders in our family. So she was going to make sure it was handled. But my ultimate responsibility, and I hate that it was my responsibility.
Right. Not the police who were there to protect
to do whatever it is I needed to do to make sure that I made it back home that night.
Exactly. You're supposed to be protecting me on my way from wherever it is I'm going. Right. Why are you the threat?
I was like, I work extremely hard for any and everything I have. Been pulled over twice, simply because, they make up some whatever it is they're pulling me over, whether it be a taillight or whatever. But I get questions like, whose car is this? It's mine. I just give you the registration. Where do you work? Why do you need to know where I work? Just because I'm out here in the BMW, just because I'm out here in this brand new car that you think I can't afford.
Flex, I work BMW, hard. Let's go.
BMW, black man working. Okay. So just like, let's take it for what it is. But it got to the point where I was so irritated with her, where I'm just like, I felt like it was a target when it came time for me to buy another vehicle. I said, this is a target. This car is a magnet. I'm just going to get a regular pedestrian car and just see what happens. And I've got no attention whatsoever. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous.
It is.
It is.
And
And what's
see, and I
crazy,
had the opposite experience when I drove a luxury car. I too drove a BMW for many years, and I would see policemen get behind me, or drive up next to me, see it was a black man in a BMW. At that time, I worked in nonprofit, so I was generally in a suit, dressed, and they would then go about their way because I think they thought I could make trouble for them.
And
Rebecca,
every
you were
time I've
going to
been
say
pulled
something?
over, I was in a suit. So there
Wow.
you go. That's out the window.
Yeah. So I don't. Yeah. It was crazy.
Rebecca,
And
you were
then
going
when I
to.
drove a clunker, I got drove.
oh man. Oh, well, I was just going to say, I mean, what's insane to me about those, I mean, I get I think they think they can get away with it. Well, they know the police know they can get away with treating people that way, especially black and brown people. But what blows my mind about that, and that why we don't, at the very least, I mean, I totally agree with y'all about, I don't think the police really have any business being in the traffic stops. But even if they are, I mean, really, I mean, when you come right down to it, and with the excuse of cops being scared in general, like, I get that it's a stressful job, but most of the interactions are, you're dealing with people in your community, and they don't treat it that way. I mean, I would get fired. I've worked a lot of food service jobs. I would be fired for treating, almost anybody, virtually any minimum wage job that deals with customers. If you approach people the way that police officers do, you'd be gone in a second. And I don't understand why we don't expect a lot more of our police officers, and that they can just say they're scared, and that's the end of it. It just, I mean, that we should at the very least have much, much higher expectations. It's really, at the end of the day, mainly, I think, I don't want to say boil it down to just being a customer service job, but you're dealing with people, and they don't treat people like they're human. And I just don't understand how that's acceptable. We wouldn't accept it from any other any other profession.
I completely agree. And especially growing up for me, I grew up interfacing with the NYPD. I lived in New York for 17 years. And something that I noticed very early on was that the cops who were harassing us outside after school and like giving us tickets, and like who became well known in the community, specifically because they were not from our community. You have cops who have never been are being assigned to black and brown neighborhoods where, one, they already have a racial problem. Two, they don't know how to interact with people outside of like that built up fear, that built up violence. Like, I would be much more comfortable even now, like with a police officer that I grew up with. Like, I saw him across the street, like he was at the cacao, or like I saw him at the store one time. Like, hey, I know that's Officer Johnson, like he lives on Jefferson, whatever. Like, I would feel like my level of anxiety would decrease just a little bit, because I know like this cop has seen me before, this cop is familiar with our neighborhood, our dynamic, and there's less likely of a chance that if we run into each other, something bad's going to happen. But there's no incentive for that to even have like some sort of idealized police reform where they focus on having people from black and brown communities police their own communities. So going forward, if that hasn't already been done, then like what are we left with but to get rid of it completely and like replace the system?
I say repurpose the system. Again, because it came out of slave patrol. So you have to completely dismantle that and come up with another purpose for it. And again, present day cops are not trained to deal with a coked up schizophrenic. They're just not.
Right.
We do.
And so
I mean,
you need those professionals that will be able to deal with that person.
We do have some of those specialized, cops in the community. There are very few of them. They are called to deal with mentally ill, and there are, there are beginnings of places for people who are predominantly just high to go and sleep off their drugs and not be incarcerated. So some of those things do exist, but they don't exist to the degree.
But exactly, not to the degree.
Right.
They need the people that are there that are making that initial stop should be taught how to actually protect and not go into it as in I need to knock this person down and detain. Right. No, you need to protect that person until the appropriate person can get there to handle that particular person. Someone specialized to do that.
Exactly.
But right now, it's all attack, detain, take down.
Right.
And most of the time, that person ends up dead before someone specialized can get there to handle the situation.
And so, it is a complex issue because the institutions that need to have that need to be built up to sort of support dismantling. For example, I work in the jail. I'm a clinical social worker at Travis County Correctional Complex, and we are the largest mental health provider in the county. I mean, we don't have an infrastructure. We have a failing infrastructure that is not treating the mentally ill on the street, and they're ending up in our care. And so we are treating them, but in order to do so, their incarceration takes a lot longer because they're there on nothing charges. They're there on criminal trespass, but then they're found incompetent, and they have to they are languishing in jail because there aren't enough beds in the state hospitals to treat them. So we've become a de facto mental health treatment facility, but it's jail. And so
being institutionalized creates another mental problem.
Absolutely. And so, when you say dismantle the police, you're really talking about taking that money and, shoring up the other institutions that need to support people so that they don't end up in that system. And so it's complex. It's going to take some time. But I think, I think white people are finally starting to see this is our problem, and we need to do something about it.
Yeah.
Starting after 450 years, starting to see it.
I agree. Something that included. Something that made me tear up the other night, and it was something so simple but affected me because it opened my eyes to something. Johnson & Johnson will now be issuing Band-Aids in multi-colors, multi-tones. And I thought to myself, after how many hundreds of years? That company's what? 89 years. And now finally,
they've had a Band-Aid for 100 years.
Well, Ivory, you can kind of relate to this because I tights in the ballet world and ballet shoes, for example, they've never had different skin shades for tights and ballet shoes, and now
dye them.
Yeah, and now that's
coming out.
Yeah, some I think, I don't know if it's Capezio, but I think there is some people that are dealing with that. So
yeah. So maybe
flesh color was never the color of my flesh.
So maybe corporations are stepping up, taking Confederate flags out of NASCAR.
Yeah, they're stepping up because they're afraid.
They are afraid.
They are afraid. Like, the people have a platform. It just honestly warms my heart to see people bullying corporations and saying, "Hey, are you with the movement or are you not? Because we'll take our money away real quick."
Because we'll take our money away real quick.
But fear, it can be a great motivator.
Oh, sure.
And I wish it was more, about people and the. But I mean, unfortunately, we are a capitalist country, and I mean, I guess at this point, it's just whatever works. But I wish, images of lynching of way, that is still going on. But I wish that had done the trick. But
it's gonna take micro anti-racism acts to keep the movement going. That's personally what I think I can do in my daily life. Is I can't go out and create a movement on my own, obviously, but what I can do is in my daily life, in my daily interactions, be aware
And
of.
it will take those of us who can't do those things to support those who can.
Yeah.
We're gonna need to
Exercising.
get behind. We're gonna need to get behind candidates who are progressive. We're gonna need to throw our financial support behind these organizations that are working to dismantle the systemic racism that's entrenched in our country. And that's the thing. It's so entrenched that one of my trepidations is that the system will not be dismantled. Yeah, advances will be made, but the deep entrenched, the redlining of Black districts, the defunding of minority neighborhoods, all of those things. Hopefully, this will translate into some change in those areas as well.
I think as long as a lot of that money is put towards education, I mean, it starts with the very young, right?
Well, we also need more, Black people in power. I mean,
we need a diversification.
Right. Exactly.
Power structure.
That's what's really going to make those institutional changes happen and they're white, of course, they're white cohorts saying, yes, this is, I'm in a position to actually make a difference. Let me do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
We need both of that. It has to happen,
Right.
So,
well, on that note, gentlemen and lady, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I want to thank our guests, Horace Charles,
yes,
Rebecca Steckler, Ivory Newsom, Carlton
Hello.
Whitehurst II, and Darlin Mark Flores.
and
Thank you all very
lovely
much.
Dale Sandish.
Thank you. Thanks for joining in the conversation and being patient with
I'd like to do this again.
Yeah.
I would too.
Yeah.
I'd be down
Yeah,
to.
thanks for
I'd be
having
down for doing that again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thank you,
for
guys.
all expressing your own points of view. And it really,
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having that conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Till next time,
Bye.
Mark,
Until
goodbye.
next time.
Goodbye.
Adios.
Adios.
Bye.
Joining us on One Voice.
Happy Pride, everyone.
Happy Pride.
Happy
Hey.
Pride.
Pride.